Welcome to TFP, the Theatrefolk podcast. I am Lindsay Price, resident playwright for Theatrefolk. Hello. I hope you're well. Thanks for listening. This week, we're gonna talk about horrible, mean, nasty people. But first, let's do Theatrefolk news. Hey, we've got news! We've got news! We've got news! We're on the move. Alright, that's enough of that. We're on the move! This past weekend began our fall conference season, and we started off with the North Carolina Theater Arts Educators Conference. And this upcoming weekend, I am going to be at the Educational Theater Association Conference in San Diego, California. If you're headed out that way, I'll be teaching 2 workshops. Writing Impactful Monologues, which is a brand spanking shiny new workshop. Very excited about that. It is a cross-curricular project in which we are going to look at the effects of globalization, but really you can use any sort of cross-curricular theme, subject, and how we move from that big notion to narrowing down into a really nice, juicy monologue. And that's within the general conference schedule. And then as a part of EDTA's Professional Development Institute, I will be teaching how to incorporate playwriting into the curriculum. And I'll be team teaching with Stephen Gregg. A real treat to be working with Stephen. And did you catch our latest newsletter? We're still in the Elizabethan era, but we're looking at Shakespeare as well as his contemporaries. Who are these writers who we just don't know as well as William? Why don't we know them as well? And there's exercises, and more exercises. I took 4 of Shakespeare's plays instead of rehashing what we already know and what you can easily find on the internet. I created exercises, found resources for exercise. It's an exercise palooza. And I think my favorite exercise of the whole newsletter actually has to do with Christopher Marlowe and not with Shakespeare at all. I took a quote from Christopher Marlowe's play, Dr. Faustus, and used that as the basis of an exercise. A lovely, lovely quote. I am envy. I cannot read, and therefore wish all books burned. Love that image. Oh. Lastly, please always remember and don't ever forget the places in which you can find this podcast. We post new episodes every Wednesday at theatrefolk.com and on our Facebook page and Twitter, and you can subscribe to TFP on iTunes. Search for us through Theatrefolk. Episode 9. Horrible People. Human beings are horrible people. Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up. Princess Bride shout out! Yes, I'm over 40, and I just did a shout out. I also use the word dude in general conversation. Okay. What I mean by human beings are horrible people is that the people we see on the street may look nice, and they may smile at you, and they may even help an old lady across the street, but there is something horrible inside of them. That is not a statement that I will ever water down. There is something inside of them, inside of every human being. Now, it could be a small, horrible thing. It could be a teeny tiny, wee, horrible thing. That nice person who smiles at you never remembers birthdays, doesn't recycle. It could be a huge, horrible thing. That nice person who smiles at you could steal money from his company. Human beings are never one facet. Never one state. We are all of us, a complex mass of contradictions, secrets, petty grievances, loves, losses. Isn't it amazing how many things that we can be at one time? Just as there is something wonderful about a person, there's always going to be something opposite, something awful, something horrible. We don't like to admit the awful stuff. We don't like people to know that there's something not shiny and smiley about us, even though it's perfectly normal. It's more than normal. It's human. It's impossible to be perfect. That's what makes us human beings, is that we are more than one thing. So to prove that point, all right, here we go. I'm going to share a couple of horrible things about me. What? Lindsay Price, ain't it so? How could you have something horrible inside of you? Oh, yes, podcast listener, it's true. I'm a horrible friend. I don't keep in touch with people. And I'm one of those people who doesn't remember birthdays. I don't remember I'm okay now, mostly because of Facebook. But for many years, I could barely remember the birthdays of people in my own family. And just in terms of in friends, I'm not good at it at all. And when I was younger, used to be so jealous of my sister because she had reams and reams and reams of friends. And then as I got older, I saw how much work she put into her friends, and then I really wasn't jealous anymore. And I don't know if that is a good thing to say about me, because I think what it basically says is I don't want to work to keep friends. I want people to like me, but I don't want to put any work into it. Another thing is that I think that I tell a lot of white lies. I lie about what I eat. I lie about if somebody asks me how I am. A lot of times I don't tell. I lie a lot on Facebook because I have a lot of professional, quote unquote, friends on there. And it's not appropriate to say what's really going on, but that kind of is a lie, you know? So take that and chew on it. Moving on. So everybody has something horrible in them. And the problem is that the broad strokes media, you know, the media, that guy, the media, he wears too much cologne, he has plugs, veneers. The media can't do anything with a multifaceted human being who loves his mother but takes drugs, who smiles at strangers but steals from his company, who's a wonderful volunteer but sometimes parks in a handicap spot, who donates to charity but shoplifted as a kid, this is the great one, you know, who did terrible things when they were 20 but then became completely reformed by the time they were 40. And the media, again, very general. I'm tarring with a wide brush and including all kinds of media in this generalization. You know, television media, news, programs, the internet. This general blob doesn't know what to do with multitasking, and they cannot multitask human beings, and they cannot think of what to do with human beings who have more than one aspect to them, and so they completely ignore that and only go for after one element. Human beings can only be one thing. The monster, the saint, the survivor, the cheater, the best or the worst. No one can be more than one thing. You cannot be both good and bad, wonderful and awful. It is impossible, which is so ridiculous because it is what we are. That is what makes a human being. And we so often see these one-dimensional versions of people. We are bombarded with paper doll cutouts. And so after a while, it is easy to start thinking about people as paper dolls. One facet, one thing, wonderful or awful, never both. It's natural. It's beaten into us. It's not surprising. And so when we sit down to write, excuse me here while I wrench this whole bus around to writing, it's natural to write people as paper dolls with one state, one desire, one focus, moving in a straight line with nary a deviation in sight. And though that's what may be in our field of vision, that is what may be rammed down our throats. We cannot do that. That's not what human beings are. We cannot write them that way because we are so much more than one. And when we write, it is so much more interesting to find the horrible and the wonderful in our characters, to make them multifaceted, to have them multitask, to make them three-dimensional, to make them human. And I know it's hard to let a character do or say an awful thing. But if no one does or says anything awful, then you've got nothing but paper. Nobody, what are they doing? I have a play. It's called The Bright Blue Mailbox Suicide Note, where a character at one point says, I would never slit my wrists, and she's very definitive about it. And then later in the play, we find out that's pretty much exactly what she's working up to do. And I have students ask me all the time when they're putting on the play, well, why does she say that? Why does she contradict herself? And every time, the person who is asking me is sure that it was a typo, that I made a mistake, that they caught something. And so it throws them when I say, well, she was lying. She lied. She's trying to cover up. And I'll see them blink, and they never considered that a character could lie. Why not? We lie all the time. People lie all the time. Why couldn't a character lie? That a character could be two things at once. That could be nice, but also have something awful in them. So there's another example. There's a podcast. I love podcasts. That's the reason I'm doing this podcast. I never listen to music. I've always got somebody's voice in my ear. And there's this particular podcast that I find very interesting. Adam Carolla. He's a comedian. And right now, I would determine it as a podcasting empire. He's got like 7 or 8 podcasts on his network. And I have to say that I only agree with Adam about 50% of the time. 50% of the time, I hate his view. I hate what he has to say. I hate the way he talks to whomever's in the studio. I hate how he always has to be 100% right and will argue his point into the ground beyond the point of interest. But all of that awful is only 50% of the time. It's only half. And that means half of the time I find him thoughtful, funny, really funny, intelligent, a loving parent, a really good friend. But how could I listen to someone who I disagree with pretty vehemently? How could I listen to someone who I don't love all the time? Because that would be so boring. Adam is human. He has a lot of contradictory, interesting, horrifying, wonderful, awful parts to his podcasting personality. And again, it's a podcasting personality. It's an entertainment personality. It's not necessarily what he's like all the time. And I have to say, I'm glad I don't agree with him all the time. It makes listening interesting. I'm always waiting to see what he's going to say next. And I can't always predict what that's going to be, which is wonderful. Why would I want to listen to boring and predictable? Why would you? Why would you want to write boring and predictable paper dolls? And this is certainly not to say that every character in your play has to be Jekyll and Hyde, huge, sweeping good and bombastic awful. That's rather extreme. And it would get in the way of the storytelling. Some characters are good with a little bit of awful. And some characters are awful with a fraction of good. Depending on the story, you could know that good in your villain. Maybe it's not appropriate for your bad guy to burst into song or say that he loves puppies. But to be honest, there is nothing scarier than a villain with that little bit of good who then goes right ahead and does something so bad. And true, not every work is going to have a bona fide villain. It's about balance, though. You need someone horrible in there. You need to have somebody mean in your work. In varying degrees. There's cheerleader mean, and then there's mass murderer mean. There's snotty coworker mean and violent partner mean. But if everybody in your story is nice, and everybody talks nicely, everybody does nice things, and nobody gets upset, or nobody says anything wrong, or, heaven forbid they use a word that is going to send someone into a tailspin, or heaven forbid they give an opinion that is against the general public. Oh, goodness gracious. Well, your audience is going to be asleep before the end of the first scene. And maybe, just maybe, you could go this way. If you have a character, a super great, they're the best person in the world character, and you give them that fraction of awful, maybe you'll find that awful grows throughout the course of the story, and that your character changes, grows up, turns into a different person, goes on a journey, changes from the beginning to the end. Now, that's exciting. That's not paper doll writing. Have you seen Breaking Bad this season? Breaking Bad is a Showtime, AMC. It's an AMC show, and it is the story of Walter White, who is started out as a pretty milquetoast science teacher who in the first season got cancer, and the only way he felt he could afford his treatments was to go into meth production, as one often does. And as the seasons have passed, it's become increasingly clear that Walter was becoming less and less of a good person and more of a bad person. And in this season in particular, it's been made very clear that Walter is not going back. He's not going to be reformed. He is not going to make a Hail Mary pass change in the final seconds and become a wonderful human being again. He has become awful, and that is where he's going to say, how often do you see that on TV? On TV, where so often what we get are these paper dolls, these one dimension, these cookie cutters who have to always say and do the right thing at a surface level. How often do we see somebody good turn bad and stay that way? So, question of the day. What makes you a human being? What's your little bit of awful that makes you multifaceted? And when was the last time you truly wrote a human character? And that's where we're going to end. That's it. That's all. Take care, my friends. Take care.